Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2017, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Tonko, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the topic of my special order.
Without objection.
Thank you. It's with deep sadness that I rise to celebrate the extraordinary life of our great friend, colleague, mentor, inspiration, much respected Congresswoman Louise Slaughter. We met a long time ago in 1983 when both of us entered as freshmen in the New York State Assembly. I understood in that moment of meeting that there was greatness there, and it only built beyond what I anticipated through the years. A woman of great respect, of great charm, of intellect, integrity, and passion for doing the right thing. And Louise, this evening, we just say thank you for the impact that you've had on our lives, and more importantly, on the people for whom you've spoken, and for those who have been impacted favorably by your sound works. We call to mind this evening the people of the 25th Congressional District of New York who have lost a great voice in this chamber, and those of other districts, iterations that she represented through the years that she served in this remarkable body. We call to mind Dawn and her rules staff, people who were there as committee people assisting her in her every move. We talk and call to mind Liam and her crew here in D.C. and at home in the district office, and certainly her family and friends, people who have worked with her through the years. It is a great loss for all of us. Louise did everything with charm. When Louise introduced herself to newly elected House Speaker Jim Wright as a newly entering member back in 1986, she spoke in that wonderful upstate New York accent, inflected with her deep Kentucky roots, which Speaker Wright immediately discerned. In her very forward way, she threw out her hand to shake his, and she introduced herself to the new Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm Louise Slaughter from upstate New York. And he responded, it's about time upstate New York elected somebody without an accent. Louise was a great storyteller. She had this way of really personalizing an issue and making it so human that you couldn't shake it. She brought the relevance of issues to human life. There was no better storyteller than Louise Slaughter. And she peppered everything with her unique and delightful sayings that were such a signature of her personality. She was a person of extraordinary integrity and courage. I remember sitting with her and some of our colleagues when Bob passed, her late husband passed. I know how much she loved him and how much he loved her. And I cannot imagine the pain she felt in that moment. But I watched her steel herself, pick herself up and go on, just the way Bob would have wanted, an expression of the deepest love and respect I have ever been privileged to witness. Louise had a devotion to public service that was born in the 1960s, in a truly aspirational moment for our country, an era that gave birth to a newfound, driven political generation. And I like to imagine Louise in that moment, listening to the voices of the people, reading news of conflict, of hope for racial and social justice, of fights for peace in the face of seemingly endless war in Vietnam, and empowering women and speaking for our environment, and all set with extraordinary music. Bob Dylan's Blowing in the Wind gave us a series of intractable questions about peace, about war, about freedom, at a time when those questions were on the lips of every single American. And Louise, speaking about blowing in the wind, was never a weather-vane politician. Amidst the uncertainty and conflict of that moment, she forged herself a backbone of steel and never wavered, never blew with the wind. She did what was right, and it didn't have to be popular. Bob had a love and passion for politics as great as his wonderful wife, Louise. They were such a Washington couple. Bob would sometimes drive Louise back and forth from Rochester, New York to Albany. He was known as an incredibly thoughtful and brilliant partner who supported Louise tirelessly. Their activism began with their fight to protect Hart's Woods in Parenton, just outside of Rochester. Louise would go on to organize Democrats in Parenton, and Bob went on to found the Genesee Valley People's Power Coalition, fighting against rate increases by Rochester Gas and Electric Corporation. Bob and Louise loved their family above all, and tonight I want to recognize their daughters, Robin Secator and Amy Slaughter and Emily Minerva, and thank them and their families for the gift of their mother's time and their unselfish giving of hers so that she could serve our nation. Robin and Amy and Emily, this nation owes you a debt of thanks for the extraordinary spirit and achievement of your parents, our great and dearly departed friends, Louise and Bob Slaughter. I have to speak of them as a team. Louise left her imprint on all whom she served in Rochester and in Washington, and for a generation yet unborn. Louise's passion and foresight live on through the lasting and extraordinary legacy of her work and through the service that she provided, knowing that that service will continue long into the future. She was recognized as a fighter for the common ordinary person. And that is the greatest tribute we can offer her. We say thank you to a humble servant who picked up the task and did it masterfully well. With that, Speaker, I yield to Representative Elliot Engel of New York's 16th Congressional District.
I thank my friend and colleague for yielding to me. I think he really just said it all. I had the pleasure of knowing Louise for almost 40 years. We served together in the New York State Assembly up in Albany, New York, and I was senior to her in the New York State Assembly. She ran for Congress a few years before I did, and she was senior to me here, and I never stopped teasing her about that, to remind her that she may be senior here, but if you put the length of our terms together, I'm senior to her, and we always got a kick out of that and always laughed. One thing about Louise is what you see is what you get. What you saw is what you got. Louise spoke her mind. She wasn't afraid to stand up to power. She was always thinking of the good for the country and for New York and her congressional district. And there was no other calculation in what she did. It was just feeling good, trying to help the people. She was outspoken, and she said what was on her mind. And she knew more things that many of us have forgotten. She knew them, and she remembered them. And she would always have a little quip or a little thing to say that would really make you laugh and would make you feel like you were with a friend, and she kind of gave you the inside scoop on a bunch of things. You know, she was the member of Congress who was the oldest member of Congress. And you'd never know it. You know, when I first found out how old she was, I thought it was a misprint. She was always young. Till the day she died, she was young. And young and having a passion of belief, of helping people, and having a belief in government, and government was there to do good for people and to be a good tool. Not, as some people would say, that government is the enemy. Louise always believed that government should be and could be and would be a friend to do things for people, for seniors, for poor people, for immigrants. If you needed someone to come and help you work for any cause that was a right cause, all you had to do was ask Louise, and she always said yes. Now our offices back in the Rayburn building are opposite each other. So you go down the hallway, if you turn left, you're in my office, and you turn right, you're in her office. And so I often got to meet her when we were going to votes and got to say things to her about New York politics. And she really had the scoop, really knew what it was. I'm going to miss her. I already miss her. And I know we have so many of our colleagues from New York who are here because all of us together have a heartfelt appreciation of what it was to be Louise and to be Louise's friend. You know, that twang she had from Kentucky, she always proudly told everyone she was from Kentucky. but her heart was really from New York, and I will miss her dearly. Rest peacefully, my friend. We all love you.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield to the representative from New York's 7th District, the gentlewoman from New York, Nydia Velasquez.
I thank my colleague for yielding and thank my friends for organizing this tribute. Louise was a remarkable woman, an astute legislator, a skilled negotiator, and a gifted debater. She will be remembered for all those traits, but she will also be remembered for her compassion, her humor, and the many kindnesses she extended to all of us. I will always recall the many times coming down to this very floor to speak and hearing Louise arguing for fairness and opposing policies bad for our nation. She was a fierce orator with a sharp wit. When she disagreed with how this House was doing business, she let it be known. She was a passionate voice for progressive values. Like a New Yorker, she never backed down from a fight. If she wanted to get something done, she dug in her heels and fought like hell for it. But as a daughter of the South, she will equally be remembered for her amazing wit, her gentle touch, her disarming smile, and her genuine friendships on both sides of the aisle. What is remarkable is that at the end of the day, when the debate concluded and the votes were taken, Louise was known for sharing a laugh with her colleagues on the opposite side of the aisle. Someone once described her, and I quote, a combination of Southern charm and backroom politics, a Southern belle with a cigar in her mouth. She truly was larger than life. When Louise came to Congress, there were far fewer women in this body. She helped lead the way for so many of us who came after, breaking down barriers. So many of us owe her a debt of gratitude for the trails she blazed. As a fellow New Yorker, as a fellow female member of Congress, but most of all, as her friend, I know I will miss her. This body is better served for her service, and the U.S. House will certainly be less colorful place without seeing her on the floor, leading debates on the rules with her Kentucky accent and her commitment to progressive values. I thank my friends for the opportunity to speak and yield back.
Mr. Speaker, I yield now to the representative from New York 17th District, Congresswoman Nita Lowey.
Mr. Speaker, our nation still grieves the loss of a great New Yorker, Louise Slaughter. I'll never forget when Louise and I, still just junior congresswomen at the time, charged up the steps of the U.S. Senate to demand that Anita Hill be allowed to testify against Clarence Thomas. Louise never lost that fighting spirit, fearlessness, and commitment to justice, equality, and women's rights. She broke barriers, becoming the first woman to chair the House Rules Committee and set a strong example of public service and principled leadership as Dean of the New York Congressional Delegation. As a leading champion of women's empowerment, she proudly represented Seneca Falls, the site of the first Women's Rights Convention. It was an honor to charge alongside Louise up the steps of the Senate that fall day years ago, and during the many battles we fought together for America's health care, women's rights, opportunity for working men and women, and so much more. New York, the Congress, and our country have suffered an immeasurable loss. I do pray that Congresswoman Slaughter's family and the legions of staff who served her may find comfort knowing her great legacy and many accomplishments have improved the lives of so many Americans. I yield back.
Mr. Speaker, I yield to the representative from New York's 12th Congressional District, Representative Carolyn Maloney.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Thank you so much for yielding, Paul, and for your incredible leadership in supporting Louise and organizing this, and all of her many elections and organizing this tribute to her tonight. No one was a better public servant or fighter for her constituents than Louise Slaughter. Her passing is a huge loss for New York, for the House, and for all of us. She worked for people right up until the day she died. And when I first came to Congress, Louise took me under her wing, and for that and her friendship, I will be forever grateful. I truly miss her dearly, but am comforted knowing the legacy that she leaves behind. When Louise became a member of the House in 1987, she was one of just 25 female leaders. Today, we number more than 100. I have no doubt that her leadership and the example she set as the first female chair of the House Rules Committee led to more women running for office. She was a trailblazer, and she broke down doors for people and for women and for real change in this country. And while I could go on and on about her legislative achievements, including the Violence Against Women Act, the first bill that I worked on when I came to Congress with Louise, she was the lead Democrat along with then Senator Biden. It was a transformational bill that addressed violence against women. She fought years for it. Many people thought it was a personal affair, a family affair, and she fought to making it a legal affair that women should be protected in any and every circumstance, and had money in it to train police and prosecutors to be more sensitive to the needs of women and the violence against them. She was a biologist by training and was very proud of this background and was a leader on FDA health issues and was the first to introduce genetic information and the Anti-Discrimination Act that became a central part of the Affordable Care Act, that you should not hold pre-existing conditions and prevent health care for people because of pre-existing conditions. She considered that one of her greatest achievements, and she led the debate on the floor for the Democrats for the Affordable Care Act and its passage. She oversaw that historic debate. And her impact extends far beyond the bills that she passed and the committees that she chaired. And she was the first woman to chair most of the committees that she became part of. During her 31 years in Congress, she was a mentor to many female members, and because of that played a major role in shaping our party and coalition we are today. She was a leader for New York, and she was a leader for Democrats in New York. She was one of the first Democrats to be elected in upstate New York. And everyone running for in office in upstate New York, the first person they went to was Louise Slaughter. I am proud and grateful to have called her a dear friend and mentor, and to be able to pay tribute to her and to say thank you to her and her family. She adored her late husband, Bob, and we all appreciate the great impact she had on me, on this Congress, and on our nation. Louise, we miss you. You are in our hearts. Thank you, dear friend. And I yield back.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield to Representative Yvette Clarke of New York's 9th Congressional District.
I thank the gentleman from New York, Mr. Tonko, for leading this special order hour in commemoration and remembrance of our dear colleague, the Honorable Louise Slaughter. Mr. Speaker, I join my colleagues on the floor today to honor a remarkable woman. Words just couldn't adequately capture the sense of sadness I felt after hearing of the loss of Congresswoman Louise Slaughter, the dean of the New York delegation. Louise dedicated her life's work to the people of Western New York and indeed all Americans across our great nation. She embodied a spirit of strength, wisdom, and grace, and she was beautiful inside and out. She represented the very best of the American spirit, our values, and our ideals. Louise was a trailblazer and was the first woman to serve as chair and ranking member of the powerful House Rules Committee. She commanded the respect and admiration of all of her colleagues. Having had the honor of serving with Louise has enriched my passion for service and my commitment to fight for the most vulnerable amongst us. Louise was indeed a woman on whose shoulders I stand. The United States Congress has lost an esteemed leader, and the New York delegation has lost a beloved dean, and I have lost a cherished friend and mentor. It was my great privilege to serve with Louise Slaughter, and she is missed immensely. I thank you, and I yield back.
Mr. Speaker, I yield to Representative Jerry Nadler of New York's 10th District.
Thank you. I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Speaker, I am heartbroken at the loss of Louise Slaughter, who is a dear friend and a beloved colleague. I first met Louise when she was elected to the State Assembly in 1982. And Elliot Engel and Louise Slaughter and I sat next to each other on the Assembly floor. She was only with us in the Assembly for 4 years, and then she came here. I trailed her by another 6 years. She always was a champion of upstate New York, which caused people to do a double take when they heard her southern lilt. She was a champion of so many things before their time. She was a champion for women's rights. She was a passionate leader as co-chair of the pro-choice caucus for many years. She protected the freedom of every woman to live, work, and start a family on her own terms. She was, as you've heard, the chairman at one point, the leading Democrat in the House Rules Committee. She was tough and determined and compassionate, and she was a fighter. She was a fighter for the vulnerable and those without a voice. And she was a microbiologist before she came into politics. And she left a lasting imprint of that with her Genetic Non-Discrimination Act. When we started getting the ability to deal with the genomics, she understood, before anybody else did, the potentials for good and for bad. And she wrote and eventually got into law the Genetic Non-Discrimination Act so people wouldn't be discriminated against on the basis of their genetic traits. She wrote the Stock Act to prohibit Congress members from trading on inside knowledge, which not every member of Congress was thrilled with. But she was more than just her legislative accomplishments. She was a gracious and true friend who brought joy and laughter into every room she entered. And she had a great sense of humor. When she ran for Congress the first time, she ran against an incumbent who, being in the minority party at that time, was in the habit of voting no on a lot of things. She labeled him in the campaign the abominable no man. So she had a sense of humor, which other people appreciated, and she will long be remembered for her sense of humor, for her decency, her humanity, her tireless, fearless work for everyone. The halls of the Capitol feel diminished without her, and I have realized over the last few weeks how lucky we all were to know her, to work with her, to call her a friend. We will always miss her, and this institution will be diminished by her absence. I thank the gentleman for yielding. I yield back.
Mr. Speaker, I yield now to New York's 24th Congressional District Representative John Katko.
But for yielding. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor the life of one of my dear friends and colleagues, Representative Dorothy Louise McIntosh Slaughter. Congresswoman Slaughter passed away last month at the age of 88 after more than 31 years of service in the House of Representatives representing the people of Rochester, New York. Born a coal miner's daughter from Kentucky, Louise quickly became a true native daughter of upstate New York, exemplifying its values and representing her fellow constituents with a zeal and tenacity that was unrivaled in her storied tenure. Becoming the first woman to chair the House Rules Committee, Congresswoman Slaughter was a pioneer in her advocacy for issues ranging from congressional transparency to health protections for those with pre-existing conditions. I had the distinct honor and pleasure and privilege to work with Representative Slaughter on a whole host of issues that affect our neighboring communities in upstate New York and the nation at large. Whether it was tackling the opioid epidemic or ensuring our citizens' access to clean drinking water, I am proud but humbled to say Louise and I worked side by side. For Louise, the interests of her constituents and fellow Americans rose above all else as she embodied the true meaning of bipartisanship, readily reaching across the aisle to people like me in spite of party or public pressure to achieve the common good. Rest peacefully, Louise. I will miss your lovely demeanor and your wonderful smile. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. I now yield, Mr. Speaker, to the representative of Georgia 5, Representative John Lewis.
Thank you, Brother Paul, for yielding. It is hard, it is difficult to stand here and know that Sister Louise Slaughter is not here. We came to Congress together, and from time to time she would call me Brother John. I love Sister Louise. She would talk, she would laugh. She was smart, gifted, brave, just courageous, and sometimes very bold. I would never forget the trip to Rochester to be with her and see how the people loved her, adored her. I think when God created Sister Louise, He destroyed the mold. She was one of a kind, so wonderful. I miss her every single day. Thank you, Brother Paul, for doing this. Sister Louise will be very proud of you. I yield back.
Thank you, Brother John. I now yield to our former Speaker, our Democratic leader, our Minority Leader, Representative Nancy Pelosi of California.
I think this may have happened to me at the funeral as well, that I followed John Lewis at the podium. What a task. Thank you for being such an inspiration. Thank you for loving Louise so much, as we know she loved you as well, Brother John. And aren't we proud of Paul Tonko and his relationship with Louise, a friendship that goes back to the state legislature many years ago in New York. Louise came 31 years ago to the Congress. You came more recently, but your friendship goes back longer. So dear were you to her. So here we have Louise, and I don't have a magic minute, so this is not an 8-hour proposition in high heels, although I'd love to do that for Louise anytime. But let me just make some wishes. I wish you could have all been in Rochester for Louise's memorial service, to hear her grandchildren talk about her. As a grandmother myself, and any time I go to a service now, I think, what do the grandchildren think? What do they know about their grandmother? Do they know how much their grandmother loved them? Louise's grandchildren do and did. Hopefully we'll be hearing more from them. They spoke magnificently about her personally. Not so great about her cooking, would you say? Not that day anyway. But anyway, they just loved her so much. And she was about the future. But she had a tremendous respect for the past as well. And so when many of us, Brother John, visit her in Rochester, we'd go to Susan B. Anthony's home to see where so much of women's rights began. She'd take us across the borderline of the district to see where it all began at Seneca Falls. She took such ownership of our suffragettes and her responsibility to carry forth their courage, their possibilities for the future. She was a Southern belle, with Southern charm and Northern timetable. So you never wanted to waste too much time not giving in to Louise, because eventually she would have her way. Save yourself some time, whatever you say, Louise. She was a beautiful person to serve with. Many of our colleagues want to speak about her. I'll have another opportunity tomorrow. But I did want to add my voice once again to our colleagues as we speak about her with great respect, admiration, which we do for some time with our colleagues. But respect, admiration, and affection, that's about Louise Slaughter. I yield back to my colleague. Thank you.
Thank you. We now yield to the representative of California 18, Representative Anna Eshoo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to our colleague and dear friend Paul Tonko. Thank you for organizing this, and to all of Congresswoman Slaughter's staff that's here. We pay tribute to you. She loved you. She loved you. Now, she would talk about each one of you. I don't know which one is which, but she thought that we all knew which one was which. She had all the stories straight. She was so proud of you. There's so much to be said about Louise. She was a great mother. She was a fabulous wife to Bob. She was a microbiologist. She was a great grandmother. She represented a district in western New York with a Kentucky accent. That will, I don't think, ever happen again. And she had a beautiful singing voice. I don't know how many of you know that. When our country was attacked and the Congress went out in front of the Capitol, it was Congresswoman Slaughter that started singing, "God Bless America," and everyone joined in on that. She was not only proud to represent the home of the feminists, those revolutionaries, she was one herself, and she was damn proud of it. She wasn't an apologist for any of it. She was proud of it because she understood that that was what was going to move America forward. She loved this house. She had a home on the Hill, and she had a home in her district, but she loved this house. And she used to stand right here. This is where she did her work. This is where she did her work. Don't cross Louise. Don't ever cross Louise. I mean, she was a lady, but I'll tell you something. If you would feel the wrath of Louise Slaughter if you went the other way on her. The way I will always remember Louise is that she knew how to love. She knew how to love well. She had a fierceness about her in taking care of her constituents. They belonged to her. She belonged to them. And what the leader recalled, the tribute that they paid to her at her memorial, I think was second to none. So, Louise, my friend, no one is ever going to fill your shoes around here. But we stand taller because we knew you. You showed us the right way to be a friend, the best way to represent people, how to fight tough and fight hard for the right things. Louise, I loved Louise's accent. And when you'd see her on the floor, she would say, "Anna, have I told you this week that I just love you?" And when she spoke, it was as if her words were just a security blanket around you. You knew that she meant it. It was tender, it was loving, and you knew that you had one of the best partners you could ever have in any undertaking. I think that Louise is very happy in heaven, and I have no doubt that she is chairing the big rules committee in the sky. And I have no doubt that when she got to the gate, there was absolutely no discussion whatsoever as to whether she was going to take a high place in heaven because of everything that she did on earth. So, Louise, be happy there. You earned it. We miss you here. But we know that your spirit is with us. It always will be. And that we will love you across eternity. There was a poet that wrote these beautiful words. And so she passed on, and all the trumpets sounded on the other side. God rest you, Louise.
Thank you. I now yield to Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur of Ohio's 9th District.
What a privilege it is with our colleagues tonight to join together to pay tribute to our friend, Louise McIntosh Slaughter, born in Harlan County, Kentucky, who wrote fresh pages in American history. There ought to be a statue at Seneca Falls that honors her service to America. It was astounding. She became one of only 288 women in American history to be elected to this House of Representatives. And she, as with all women members who've served as House members, was vividly aware she was an American pioneer, as only 3% of individuals who've ever served here to date have been women. What a marvelous person she was to be with. We had the privilege of serving together for over 3 decades. Her acuity, her passion, her perseverance, her sparkling humor, and keen mind brought new life and direction to our republic and to every member here. She was a treasured friend. Yes, Dean of the New York delegation. She also became the first woman to ever chair the Exclusive Rules Committee, a committee whose unusually round-the-clock schedule required members to work through the night and into the wee hours of the morning, often past midnight, or convening at the crack of dawn. It wasn't an easy job. That committee is grueling, a place of grueling endurance, and yet she traversed that brutal track day in and day out without a whimper. How she could remain crisp in subsequent floor debates on hundreds and hundreds of bills and amendments, managing thousands of details in different bills and amendments, is a vivid testimony to her mental and physical strength, which she devoted to our nation. Gracious to a fault, and I recall her inviting members to her Rules Committee office, always helping members to feel at home here. As the eldest woman in the House with 88 years of experience, Louise Slaughter brought wisdom that served America superbly. She was dedicated to the working people of our country, to the rights of women, and she never stopped giving. The daughter of a blacksmith who worked in a Kentucky coal mine, she was a tireless advocate for workers in Rochester at places like Kodak or Xerox, and she stood shoulder to shoulder with her community and fought with full soul against bad trade deals that she correctly feared would hollow out her community's jobs and in turn the American middle class. And she was right, and she never gave up fighting for them. She co-authored the Violence Against Women's Act and fought full bore for equal pay for equal work, and stood tall her whole career in our effort to make our nation more just and equal. Last night I attended an event at the Holocaust Museum, and one of the women docents who took me around, I told her what happened to Louise, and she said, "Oh my goodness, I'm from upstate New York. I was her constituent. She gave me a ticket when I was a Girl Scout to come to Washington and to go to see, and look what I'm doing now, a very high-level person at that museum. I said, Louise's gifts keep on giving. Louise Slaughter, a grateful nation thanks you, and thanks your husband, Bob, who was at your side for so many, many years, and your beautiful daughters and grandchildren, and all the constituents from the greater Rochester area. You will be truly, truly missed. And through your passionate and loving work for America and commitment to liberty, you have helped make America a much more just and equal nation. I thank my colleague Paul Tonko for his love of Louise and for always sitting with her and for enjoying and sharing these years. You have done a superb, masterful job this evening of paying full tribute to her and to her life. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Capter. I now yield to Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, the Congresswoman for Texas 18.
Thank you. I thank Congressman Tonker, a dear, dear friend of Louise. I thank you so very much. And I rise today to really highlight the sunshine that Louise Slaughter, Congresswoman Louise McIntosh Slaughter, really was to all of us. I'm reminded of that day when those two planes landed in Rochester, New York, her beloved community. It was a bright, sunny day, but it was almost amazing as the buses drew up to the place of her funeral and the lines and lines of Rochester citizens, her constituents, who were lining up 2 by 2, waiting to come to honor her. That was a true testimony to what Louise Slaughter and really Bob, her husband, were to that community. They loved that community, and that community loved her. 88 years of youth, because she was young and vibrant and ready. And I am delighted to acknowledge so much that she did in the areas of women's rights and empowerment, the arts, healthcare, the battlefield preparedness, economic revitalization, the environment, and social justice. And of course, her work dealing with the issue of the genetics that really a lot of people in Congress didn't even understand, but Louise, with her expertise in microbiology, there she was educating all of us. Her leadership on the Affordable Care Act, she was one of the soldiers, the generals that made sure that it passed, and as well her great work in dealing with the Violence Against Women Act, the Stock Act, to make sure that we as members of Congress did the right thing financially. But really I want to emphasize the tutoring that Louise Slaughter gave to me, and I want to thank her staff. Her staff is sitting back in this chamber, staff in her home district. But if you came to the Rules Committee, either as Louise was a member, a senior member, or the ranking member or chair, her astuteness and genius, her sharp wit, her reminding members that she was the chair, that we could learn from her if we decided to do so. I know personally, as a frequent visitor to the Rules Committee, Louise Slaughter was in charge, and the first woman chair of this powerful committee, and I learned fast from her. I cannot thank her enough for teaching a new member at that time of the works and the goings-on and the protocols of the Rules Committee and how to do it right. Thank you so very much. She never lost her humor, that wonderful Southern twang, and of course, who would be better leading Seneca Falls than Louise McIntosh Slaughter? I thank her for a fight for women's rights and as well for taking me to Niagara Falls as a member of the Homeland Security Committee. So finally, as I close, I'm reminded that Congresswoman Slaughter had an iron fist and a velvet glove, and I loved it. And I loved her wit, and I loved the fact that she was a true American. So my prayer is that the Lord bring comfort to the many people, those whom Louise knew and those who felt they knew Louise Slaughter, who know that a mighty oak has fallen and are heartbroken at her loss. I ask that God bless her, may God rest her, and as well, may God bless her constituents as God blesses the United States of America. Farewell, Congresswoman Louise McIntosh Slaughter. You will never be forgotten, and you will always be remembered. I yield back.
Thank you, and I now yield to Representative Barbara Lee of California's 13th District.
Thank you very much. First, let me thank you, Congressman Tonka, for leading
this important hour in memory of our beloved friend and colleague, Congresswoman Louise Slaughter. Every time I walk on this floor, I still look for Louise. Actually, Paul, right there, the void that she has left is just unbearable. Her passing was devastating news for all of us here, but I must once again send my thoughts and condolences to her beautiful daughters, her grandchildren, and to her entire congressional district and the state of New York, and really to our entire country. Louise was a dear friend and mentor, and she was an unparalleled legislator. And of course she loved her district and fought for them with passion, intellect, and dedication. And I also want to say to Louise's staff how much I know, like Anna said, that she loved you and she respected you. And I have to say, you know, around here, poaching is a no-no. Well, Louise poached one of my staff members, and I told her, and when we talked about it, I said, I am so happy, Louise, you're the only member that I would be happy about poaching. And so thank you all, because I know she loved you, and I was happy to allow Louise to poach my staff because she did an incredible job for Louise. Louise invited me to her district several times. And I tell you, the love and the respect all across her district I witnessed. I said, if only my district, you know, saw this, you know, how she brought people together, because I think we could learn a lot from Louise's ability to build coalitions. I remember when I first came to Congress, yes, 20 years ago, April 21st, it'll be 20 years. Louise came up to me and she says, honey, and she called everybody honey, as you know. She said, I want to be your friend. She said, and I want to get to know you. She said, and I want to invite you to come up to Seneca Falls to mark the 150th anniversary of the Declaration of Sentiments. And I tell you, that was quite a remarkable moment for me to be with Louise Slaughter, and we became close friends from that day forward. She was a trailblazer, the only microbiologist in Congress. She had a PhD. She was brilliant. Also, watching Louise work late into the night, past midnight, but yet she stayed engaged and energized no matter how late the Rules Committee worked. She used her role, though, as chair to fight for children and for families, for women, for communities of color, for those living below the poverty line. Another remarkable thing about Louise was her humor. Any member of Congress, just ask anyone, Republican or Democrat, and they'll tell you a story. They'll share a story about her sense of humor. Yet Louise was very direct. She did not mince her words. She was a straight shooter. And you never had to guess where she was coming from. And I remember when her dear husband Bob passed. I got to know Bob because we traveled together several times. And when Louise came back, she told me, she says, honey, she said, I couldn't live if I didn't have this job. She said, I love serving the people of my district. I love helping the people of Western New York. You know, I love serving this country. This was her life's work. So finally, let me just say, I not only lost a colleague, but also a dear friend. My prayers are with her family and friends, her staff, her district. Louise will have a lasting place in history, though, and her spirit is with us tonight. She was a woman who exuded grace, dignity, intelligence, and she touched and enriched all our lives. Louise, we will miss you so much. May you rest in peace. May God bless you, and thank you again, Paul.
Okay, thank you, Congresswoman. I now yield to Representative Jackie Spear of California's 14th District, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, thank you, and to my dear friend, Paul Tonko, who loved Louise like no one else in this chamber. Thank you for arranging this for us tonight. Tom Jones had a song, She's a Lady. Louise Slaughter was that lady, except none of the other lyrics of that song were appropriate for Louise. She was a lady who was tough as nails, with steel backbone, and a sharp and very funny tongue. There are many people I like in our chamber. Few I truly love. I loved Louise Slaughter. Members come and go and hardly leave a footprint around here, even members who have served long periods of time. That's not true about Louise. I still did it today. I walk onto this floor seeking her out. I look at C-SPAN and expect to see her presenting another cogent argument on the inane closed rule offered by the other side. There is a void in this chamber with her passing, but her footprints are everywhere. Louise distinguished herself in so many issues and in so many ways. The first woman, as we've said over and over again, to represent Western New York. The first woman to chair the Rules Committee. Now, as an 88-year-old woman, she was chairing this committee into the wee hours of the morning, day after day, and never lost a beat. She's one of the longest-serving members. She's the only microbiologist. She was responsible for creating the first $500 million set aside for breast cancer research. She created the Office of Research on Women's Health. And she is responsible for the passage of the Stock Act. And Mr. Speaker and to our leader, Nancy Pelosi, I hope that we take the time to name the Stock Act after Louise Slaughter. You know, Louise and I spent wonderful evenings together with Paul Tonko and Marcy Kaptur at dinner at the National Democratic Club. She kept us in stitches. She did not suffer fools gladly, and she would see a phony $2 bill of a member on the floor and not mince words. She also taught me to speak Southern. She taught me that you should say, "Bless your sweetheart," which really meant move over, expletive deleted. I will always remember her lying peacefully in the hospital with perfectly coiffed hair, as only a lady would have, and a faint smile on her face. I like to think that she was smiling because she left this world with her boots on. She was still fighting for her constituents, taking her last breaths with dignity, strength, elegance, and at peace, with her 3 daughters looking on with love and admiration. Louise, you are now with your beloved Bob. We all here, including your extraordinary staff who is seated here in the chamber, are heartbroken. We are frankly still in shock, but we are deeply grateful to have known and to love you. God bless you always.
Thank you, Congresswoman. And we now yield to Representative Alma Adams of North Carolina's 12th District.
I want to thank my colleague for yielding. I rise today to honor the life and legacy of my dear friend, Congresswoman Louise Slaughter. I didn't know her as long as many of my colleagues, but our brief association was profound and meaningful. When I came to Congress 4 years ago, Louise Slaughter was one of the first to welcome me. She was always genuine, kind, and personally supportive, always pleasant, and she always made you feel really good. As a history-making, trailblazing champion of women's rights and the only microbiologist, as you've heard, in Congress, Louise Slaughter fought for opportunity for all people. The impact of her years of advocacy and mentorship and friendship can be seen here today in the many colleagues who are standing together to honor her life. Louise was a champion for the people from the great state of New York, but I like to think of her with Kentucky roots and a Southern accent as a fellow Southerner at heart. She left big shoes to fill, but I know she'd be proud to welcome in the next generation of leaders. And so I join my colleagues this evening in expressing my deepest sympathies for the family, for the friends, for the staff, and the constituents that she leaves behind. So she may no longer be with us on earth, but her spirit and her passion for life will live on for generations to come. She clearly made our world much better than she found it.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I now yield to the New Hampshire District 1 representative, Congresswoman Carol Shea Porter.
Thank you, Congressman Tonko, and I know how close you were to Louise and how much she loved you and you loved her. So I offer my condolences not only to Louise's family, but also to Paul and to the entire chamber, and to me, because I loved Louise also. And you hear people using the word love here, and it was very genuine. When I arrived in January of 2007, I saw the fire in Louise and I saw the honey in Louise. She was a mixture of both, and that's what made her so absolutely delightful. I saw her as the new chairwoman of the Rules Committee take on our friends across the aisle about so many issues here, and she had that fire in her. But then I saw her with the honey and the sweetness, and that's why people use the word love when they talk about Louise. So I want to tell just a very short story about my first real close encounter with Louise Slaughter. I had a dear friend in New Hampshire who very much admired Louise and wanted to meet her. And I said, you know, she's busy, she's just taken over this new position, and, you know, I'm new, but okay, I'll ask her. So we're walking there, and I called Louise over, and I said, Louise, I'd like to introduce you to somebody who just has always admired you. And Louise says, honey, have her come into my office. And so we did. And Louise sat down on the couch like she didn't have a thing to do that day except to entertain us with tea and small talk and just her warmth and her vibrancy. My friend never forgot that. I never forgot that either. That was Louise, absolutely full of love and, as I said, full of honey and also full of fire. We miss her very much here. We always will. Condolences to her staff who loved her as well, and I know that she loved them, and to the people of Western New York. Thank you for sharing her with us for so long, and I yield back.
Thank you, Congresswoman. And now we'll hear from the gentleman from Texas 35, Congressman Lloyd Doggett.
Thank you so much for organizing this special order. I do know how special that Louise was to you and to so many of us. She was a dear friend for many years, an outspoken advocate for social and economic justice, and she put together a great team, a series of teams through her years here, some of whom are on the floor today, and we salute them also. Louise was funny. She was sometimes a bit conspiratorial, and she was a person who just refused to act her age in the best ways possible. I was amazed myself, knowing that Louise had been here a few years more than I had, to learn what her age was at the time of her passing, because she was out powerfully speaking truth to power right up until the week before she passed. She had the enthusiastic support of her late husband and tremendous partner, Bob, and both of them understood the challenges of public service, and they withstood repeated Republican assaults with wit and grit. Her fierce passion was matched with sincere compassion and kindness. Over the years, time and time again, she reached out and helped me and helped other members. I admired her unwavering commitment to speak truth and to honor values of acceptance, equality, and justice. She put the health and well-being of people first, and she fought tirelessly to improve the lives of the people in her community and across this country. Louise showed just how much one determined woman can do for our country. As chair of the Rules Committee, she was involved in every major piece of legislation and many minor ones that came before this House. And in her service on rules, it can certainly be said that she worked day and night, sometimes all night, on behalf of the people of this country. She overcame significant resistance to secure passage of the Violence Against Women Act, achieving some historic increases in funding for women's health. She was a real trailblazer when it came to so many issues and inspired so many women to get involved and make a difference for our country. She authored the Stock Act to ensure more complete and timely disclosure of financial dealings by the members of this House so that no one was trading off the public trust for private gain. I think of Louise and look over to this microphone each time a rule is brought up in the House, setting forth the terms of debate for legislation. There's a vacancy in the House, and there's a vacancy in our hearts for a tough but generous woman. We salute her daughters, Megan, Amy, and Emily, her grandchildren, her great-grandchild, all of whom she often referred to and showed such great affection for. May be a source of comfort for each of them that their mother was a loyal and loving friend, a fierce and genuine public servant, a force to be reckoned with, a champion for so many vital causes, and may her very fiery spirit live on with all of us. I yield back.
Thank you, Congressman. Mr. Speaker, there you have it. Just a few of the colleagues of Louise Slaughter that shared their sentiments. You can tell that she had this lasting touch upon each and every one of us. We're made better because we crossed paths in life, that we traveled journeys together, and she'll leave a forever quality in our hearts and our souls. And to our champion, our trailblazer, the true voice for the weak-voiced or underheard in government, the pioneer expression, the drum major for women. It goes on and on. She earns so many labels. To our friend Louise Slaughter, our colleague, our mentor, rest in peace, beloved friend. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3, 2017, the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Schweikert, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I get ourselves organized here, this evening we're going to actually try to do something. It's probably a little dangerous and a little tricky. We're going to try to do some math from behind the microphone. You know, we have a running joke in our office that being a member of Congress means you often work in a math-free zone, but the math always wins. And, you know, to our friends over here, I guess I don't mean to jump onto this, but you just heard some of the discussion about Ms. Slaughter. I'm obviously from a different part of the country, a different party, different philosophy, and she was always incredibly kind to me and funny. Most people, I don't know, completely understood. She had a brutal wit. And so a couple times when I would go in front of the Rules Committee, sometimes the banter back and forth, you sat there and go, is she just playing with me? So just for my friends that are just leaving from that.